Your child is deaf are some of the most frightening and devastating words a parent can hear. It means your child is different, and the parent often feels helpless. These feelings are normal, but questions need to be asked. Parents need to be aware of the type of education their child should have that would best the child should receive to best benefit them and their specific hearing loss. Deafness is a complex issue, oftentimes because people don't understand that there are two different kinds of deaf: big D deaf and little d deaf. The two are spelled either with a big D or a little d, and there's a huge difference between the two. The big D deaf is a medical dysfunction, or little d deaf, I apologize, is a medical dysfunction. It means that the person cannot hear. Big D deaf is not a disability. It has its own language, culture, community, heritage, and pride. These people are choosing to be deaf. They're wanting to be deaf. They don't want to be hearing. There are also different types of communication: oral communication and tonal communication. Oral communication includes lip reading, speaking, hearing, if the child can, or having practices to try to learn how to hear. Tonal communication is oral, but you add American Sign Language to it. With education, there's mainstream and residential. Mainstream is when a child is put into a school that has a mostly deaf or hearing atmosphere. The teachers are hearing, the other students are hearing. They can be put into a classroom with other deaf students if there are enough of them, and that can form a small deaf community. But generally, the child will be with hearing people and have hearing teachers. Residential would mean that the student would attend a school during the week and go home on the weekends. Some of their teachers may be hearing, but most of the staff is deaf, principals, teachers, etc. Although their students are deaf, and all the students will use ASL and speak in English and sign to communicate with each other. There are pros and cons to both mainstream and residential. Mainstreaming pros include that the student learns how to operate in the hearing world. They're able to live at home. There are a variety of academics that they can choose from. Just like a normal school, they have many options, choose from different classes, and then there's often additional support, like interpreters, note takers, to help the students to achieve the best that they can. The cons includes language barriers. Obviously, if the student can't hear or speak, they're not able to hear or talk to the other students. That can be very frustrating. It slows down instruction when the teacher is teaching. They have to go through an interpreter often, or have to slow down and ask the student if they're understanding. If the teacher has to ask if they're speaking too fast, if the student isn't understanding the lip reading. The student often misses out on information that's given, either through the teacher or other students. Often when teachers and other students communicate, the child doesn't know that other students are talking, or the interpreter leaves that out because it's not instruction straight from the teacher. Also, with the interpreters, there's no standardized qualifications for educational interpreters. So this means that if your child is taking a high-level course, biology, chemistry, something that's often difficult to understand, that the person interpreting the words may have no knowledge of the subject whatsoever, which can be scary because your child may not learn what they're supposed to if the interpreter doesn't know the words. Some classes are hearing-centric. They're not classes targeted for deaf students at all, like music, band, etc. A student can often get frustrated with a class like that because they won't be able to hear anything that's going on. They're rarely taught deaf pride. The student knows that they're different, they feel different, and they get very frustrated with being different. There's lack of deaf role models and friends. They can't relate to anyone. They don't have people to look up to see it's okay that I'm deaf, I can be successful. For residential, there are also pros and cons. Pros include deaf identity is promoted. People are proud that they're deaf. They want you to be proud that they're deaf and that you're deaf. The child sees themselves as capable of the same achievements as a hearing person. Along with the pride, they see that they can excel and achieve and make good grades like the other hearing students that they may know. Language abilities are actually improved. Studies show that ASL helps improve English skills, and the students are taught English. They're taught to use their words if they can. They're taught to speak if they can. And written English is also taught. They write papers just as if they were in a hearing school. Surroundings are deaf, like alarms, bells, etc. are made for deaf people. They vibrate, lights flash instead of make noise. There are deaf role models and mentors, either through the teachers, coaches, principals, even other deaf parents that may be around. The students have mentors and people to look up to and friends to relate to. There's a variety of extracurricular activities, especially since the students live on the campus. They're able to participate and practice after school or before school because they're already at school. And builds a lasting network of friends. Often the people that they meet, because they live in the same area, spend so much time together, they often build these lasting relationships that are so important. Cons, however, include that they're separated from their families, and that can obviously be something that's very devastating, especially to begin with when the child moves to the new school. Often the equipment is outdated. These schools often receive less funding, so the books can be old, the electronic equipment can be old, computers are old, so the students aren't always up to date on what's going on or what is available education-wise. And then also the dorm supervisors have high turnover rates. It can be difficult to live with a whole bunch of teenagers, especially when deaf people are often very loud. So living in the same quarters as deaf folks can be sometimes very frustrating, but this causes students not to have as much stability as they probably should have. In conclusion, determining a deaf program can be very difficult. There are obvious pros and cons to both programs, and parents must remember when deciding that the student, or it's essential for the student and the child to learn, and success has to be the goal. Parents need to be selfless in their decisions. They need to decide what's actually best for the child, not what makes them feel better or makes them look better as a parent. They need to want their child to be the best learner and student possible. Thank you. Do y'all have any questions?
Do you know about what age the child is when the parents find out that they're deaf and make the decision to have them be Big D or Little D?
It really varies depending on the child, depending on the hearing loss, and actually depending on the parent. Often you can see that your child isn't responding at a very young age. Often people will bring infants in to have their hearing tested, which you should. Usually when a baby is born these days, your baby is tested for hearing loss. Previously, in years before, people didn't really do that very often. They didn't think to do that, but now people are catching it sooner, which is great because then it gives you more time. Your child can actually be enrolled earlier in a program, in like a speech class, so that you can see how well they're learning lip reading, seeing how well they're learning signing, and decide on how that student is adapting to which one they're kind of choosing naturally. So, I don't know, did that answer your question?
What age groups are usually included in the residential schools?
It usually starts, usually most residential schools can go from kindergarten through high school, but oftentimes the population of the kindergarten through 5th is lower because oftentimes the parents are still trying to determine what's best for the child. Often the populations of middle school and high school are usually higher, especially also when the child gets older, the parent feels more confident in the child to be away from home for weeks at a time. Oh, go ahead.
Do you know the cost of the schools?
No, I don't know. Often it depends on the state. It depends on how much funding the school actually gets. And it kind of depends on also if the family receives any money for having a child with a disability. Any other questions?
You said that deaf children's language skills tend to be more developed than hearing children's. Does this give rise to more deaf writers?
Deaf writers. Honestly, there are quite a few deaf writers, but kind of the statistics that they often use is that when you choose, whether it be Big D deaf or you just choose signing with your baby, when you realize they compare that to people who use the baby sign language for hearing babies, and often those children who are hearing